Petey Beats here from Pop Turner, speaking to Susanna Fogel about Cat Person. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. You have such an incredible, enthusiastic voice. I'm going to have to try to up my game a little bit.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Well, we got to be excited about it. I mean, did the Sundance run and everything. Now people are going to be able to see it in theaters. I mean, if we're not excited, what are we doing here? Let's be honest.
No, I totally agree. I love it. I'm inspired. I'm going to try to level up. Okay.
But it's pretty crazy because for me personally, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the same boat as me, like, I remember when this movie was announced. Like, I was familiar with the short story, and then I saw that Emilia Jones and Nicholas Braun were cast. Like, I was excited. So it was like a long time coming, because I remember when it was announced, and then I finally got to see it now. I mean, is it starting to kind of sink in that more and more people are able to see Cat Person?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so thrilled about it. It's obviously been a weird year with the strikes, and I think everybody entered a bit of a dissociative state where they forgot about what they were working on before and what was to come. And I did, obviously I knew this movie was coming out, but now it's real and it's here, and it feels really like the first exciting worky thing that's happened in many months. So this has been a great week of getting ready for this release.
100%. I mean, I'm watching this movie and there's so many things that come to mind. I feel like so many themes and important messages are kind of thrown at you many ways in this film. But like, first thing we got to talk about is obviously the genre bending component of this. I mean, I find it interesting because genre bending, especially in the last 3 years, I feel like was a big kind of trend in like TV and film, where like everything was kind of trying to be combined together and everything. Do you feel like that just happens, or do you feel like it is kind of premeditated in certain ways? Like, I'm just curious about that specifically.
Sometimes it feels like people are trying to force it. With this particular story, I mean, I happen to like it because I feel like it can sometimes lure people into watching really character-driven material when they might not watch it if it was just a drama, or just a comedy. There's something really watchable about it that makes people want to put their phones away and actually concentrate on it, which is why I think horror movies do so well at the box office, no matter what else is going on. But with this movie, I think there was the experience of reading this story when it was a short story, where that you'd start reading and it would seem banal and it would seem fine. Everything's fine. Then you start to get a feeling like things are not great. Then you're like, don't go in the house. It really does carry the arc of a bit of a horror movie. And when I got to know Kristen, the writer, she said that she structured it very much like it was a horror movie, which is her favorite genre. So it sort of naturally lent itself to that, especially because of how dark and disturbing some of Margot's inner thoughts are in the short story as she's going on this superficially positive dating road with Robert. She's like thinking the darkest possible things, which is such a relatable thing, but it also lends itself to wanting to see that played out.
To add to that, because it's actually interesting you bring up the horror movie component of it, because obviously we're going to say thriller more. I mean, but there's some moments. Let's be honest, Susanna. There's some moments in this. I mean, and Emilia Jones does an incredible job with this. And you've talked about this in past interviews. I mean, the whole kind of thing about, women feeling unsafe, you know what I mean? And everything, and feeling vulnerable. I mean, there are moments where you're watching this movie and you're like people are scary, you know what I mean? Like, there's more ways to scare you now than just gore and jump scares. So in that way, Cat Person does have those like horror thriller elements, if you think about it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it always had that, it always kind of had that in the structure of the story. And I think Michelle Ashford, the writer, did a great job of elevating all of that to a really literal place in the movie. Just because to really communicate what it feels like to be a young person, a young woman in particular, when your life can have a lot of levity and comedy, but then there's also a constant fight or flight that you feel just being a woman in life.
Yes.
Walking around a dark corner in your life a million times, you're always aware that you are vulnerable. So I thought that, it was important to make people feel that fear watching it, whether they're men or women, just watching it and feeling that heart pounding is kind of the only way to make them feel what it feels like to be Margot or someone like her in the world.
And to add to that, I'm curious if you can kind of answer this from a directorial perspective, because, you know, it all starts kind of from the writing of the page. You're kind of given this amazing script, and then you're, you know, tasked to put it, you know, on camera with amazing actors and everything. But this whole thing about the dangers of dating in kind of the modern digital kind of age is very interesting to me too, because, you know, there was a big kind of craze with online dating and everything, and this whole thing about, you know, and Nicholas Braun did a great job with this, but like, he was, you know, great in text messages, you know what I mean, in a lot of ways, right? And then, you know, real life was not great, right? So there's this kind of push and pull a little bit too with that. Were you thinking about that kind of thing? Because there's a lot of themes in this, a lot of important things, but that one about digital dating a little bit, like, were you thinking about that a lot prior to shooting as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the movie is largely about two people who they march down the road of having this like physically intimate encounter, but along the way they really do not know each other. Yes. And they've talked a lot, but the talking they haven't actually been in each other's airspace very much. It's just been virtual. And I think it can give you a real false sense of intimacy. It can give you a sense that you know someone, but what you know is degrees removed from what it actually feels like to be in that person's presence. And then when you're suddenly in that person's presence and you're sort of jumping all the way to like a sexual situation, it's actually, there is something really unnatural about that. And part of that is that it's the impersonality that is really what's happening when you're texting. You're texting in a room by yourself. You are the one touching the phone. There's another person there. So it's as much about you as it is about them. It's as much about how you happen to read something on any given day based on your own mood, and how you respond based on if you've had a glass of wine or whatever. So it's like everything is a little bit obscured from the other person. And so it's no wonder that when you're in that other person's presence, you both, you know, have a level of discomfort with them, or there's a disconnect between what it felt like and what it feels like to be with them. And also don't feel comfortable standing up for yourself because you don't know them. You actually don't know them.
100%. No, it was that, like I said, I'm curious too, you know, making this film, because watching this film made it like you think about a lot of things. Like, for example, I'm watching this and I'm thinking of a lot of themes and kind of elements at play. And then I'm done watching it, you know, preparing for this interview, and I'm thinking of even more things. Do you think about how packed this movie is at all? Because it is, like, there's a lot happening in this movie, like a lot, you know what I mean? So I'm just curious from a filmmaking perspective, if you think about how packed it is element-wise.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted that, you know, yeah. There's a lot of ideas, and it's really hard to put it into one box or another. And I think that's what makes it interesting. And I also think that's what their experience with each other is like too. Sometimes it feels great, but it's not a romantic comedy where everything feels great and then it's a happy ending. It's like, sometimes it feels great, you get that. Sometimes it feels scary, you get that. It kind of goes into all these different places, because her experience with Robert, the journey of that contains a lot, you know, and the journey of a lot of people's love stories or bad encounter stories contain lots of arcs and lots of chapters. When you sit down with a friend to talk about the drama, there's a lot going on, you know?
100%. I mean, you know, I will say this, obviously, you know, you mentioned comedy and everything. I mean, this is not like this is very intense movie, you know. Booksmart is one of my favorite movies, and I generally think that Booksmart is one of the best comedies that's been made in the last 10 years. I really mean that, honestly. Because the serious undertone perspective of that movie too, the self-reflection component and the lens of like, yeah, it's funny, but like these characters are really trying to figure things out, and they're gonna like get their feelings hurt, and it's gonna be an emotional bumpy ride. Have you always seen comedy with a serious undertone and a serious lens from a writing directorial perspective?
Oh yeah. Yeah. My favorite genre is the sort of hybrid of the two. And you know, whether it's Booksmart, which is more comedy forward, with sort of deep gravitas.
It's very deep though. I will say that movie hits hard. I'm just letting you know.
It is, but it's sort of more broadly comedic on the surface of it.
Yeah.
To something like this, where it's not a comedy, but there are funny moments in it, and the people are funny. They're like funny people in a dramatic situation or a thrilling situation.
Yes.
it's, I think dramatic people in a dramatic movie is just not a thing that I would necessarily be drawn to. Even though I've done some more dramatic content, it's always with people that have a real sense of warmth and mirth to them. So yeah, I mean, I love that hybrid. That's what I relate to. That's what all my friends and family members are. We're all kind of toggling between deep thoughts and funny thoughts and ridiculous thoughts. And,
I mean, think about it. Some of like the most popular like family sitcoms of all time. Like you think about like Boy Meets World was like one of my favorite shows growing up. Like there was some very intense episodes of that. You know what I mean? Looking back, that like dealt with a lot of important issues. So I feel like there's always been a serious lens undertone with the comedy genre that I just kind of realized it just hits me a little more now. But getting back to Capris, I mean, Emilia and Nicholas did such an amazing job. I mean, they're so good in this movie. Like, so I don't know what more to say.
I agree. I agree.
I don't know what else more to say. I mean, it's one of those things, like you talk about, you try to like define the performances. I mean, everything was great. Like there was nothing else to say. But are there any conversations at this point, knowing like, I mean, you go in there, you talk to them, their abilities and everything, but like, what are those conversations, if any, that the director is having with Emilia and Nicholas? Like, what's that like specifically?
You mean when we were like getting ready to shoot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we really, this is a movie where people are often not saying what they mean. They're saying what they mean when they're not together. And then when they're together, they're saying everything but what they mean. And it's a movie about projection. It's a movie about subtext. It's a movie about like people actually not connecting, even though they're, supposed to be, they're in situations where they're supposed to feel incredibly connected, like when they're having sex, but there could not be more disconnected. Yeah. So it's about that. And so what we did was we just went through the script together and talked about what's underneath every single line of dialogue. There's something going on. Like if he's feeling insecure, he says something a little aggressive. Like why is he saying this? Because he feels that. Why is she saying this? Because she wants him to think she's that. Everything has like there's a what's my motivation question for like every single thing they say to each other when they're together. And when they're actually apart, when she's with her friends, when she's just talking about how she feels, she's much more free and comfortable saying what she wants, what she thinks, what she's not sure about. But when she's with him, you just get this very performative version of both of them, and what they're performing versus what they want and feel it just shows you how far apart that they are from really being able to integrate those two, which we all should do. Going to be happy,
Like I said, I have interviewed other directors and writers and asked a similar question about like what are the that's a risky question sometimes, because sometimes literally I'll ask like, what were the conversations like right before shooting, right? And they're like, there weren't much. Like they just kind of went in and like did their thing. But last question before we wrap up. I mean, whether you're a writer, director, actor, musician, I mean, you're all storytellers. Susanna Fogel is a storyteller. What excites you about storytelling specifically?
Oh, that's a nice thing to say. Well, I'm a person who likes to think a lot about what is going on in people's psychology. My parents are both shrinks. My dad's a psychiatrist and my mom's a psychologist. So I'm always thinking about why people do what they do, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, what leads them to make mistakes, what they're not self-aware about, what their flaws are. And I love to show people, I just love to show human behavior in different ways, and yeah. I love to show human relationships. I love to show people things that feel so real to them that they're able to feel less alone when they watch what you make. So yep. This is a really good example of a movie where I want people to watch this and think, oh my God, that happened to me.
The relatability, yep. And I've seen you talk about that in other interviews. Yeah. I didn't bring that one up that much up. I was trying to make it fresh.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I want people to feel like, I want people to think about their own lives when they watch what I make. I want people to think, oh, I've been in that situation, or I'm motivated to do something differently because of this. So that's always a big part of it. I also I'm really bad at small talk. I like to talk about real shit. And I love making films that can be really entertaining, but lead you to think and talk about real shit, whether that's like a serious, deep topic. Like I worked on a World War II show last year that came out in May.
Yep.
And that, we tried to make that still have a lot of heart and humanity and beautiful locations and costumes. So you're like watching it because it's an entertainment, and then you're actually thinking about fascism. It's like, that's what I want. So somebody referred to that as broccoli tempura. It's got broccoli, but there's tempura. So I like to present.
You're on the genre bending kind of lens a little too, but
yeah, exactly. I like to fry up some delicious tempura for people and then give them some broccoli.
And Cat Person's gonna be opening in theaters October 6th, so they gotta go check it out. It was very intense watching it, but it was a great film. Susanna, obviously, it was truly a privilege to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.